John had always prided himself on his loyalty. He'd been married to his wife Mary for over 25 years. They'd built a life together that was supposed to last until the end of their days. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. They'd weathered the usual ups and downs that come with long-term relationships, financial struggles, health issues, and the occasional disagreement about the house being too messy. But no matter what, they always found a way back to each other. But nothing could have prepared John for what he would discover one quiet afternoon. It had been about 9 months since Mary had told him she'd felt distant. She didn't say much, just that she was tired of work, tired of the routine. But John wasn't the type to jump to conclusions. She'd been through a lot recently. Her father had passed away, and they had to move to a new city for his job. It had been a stressful year, and he thought maybe the distance was just a phase. She'd be back to herself soon. He never imagined it would be anything more. It started with an innocuous text message. John had been going through some old emails when he noticed something strange, a notification on his phone for a new text message from an unknown number. It wasn't uncommon for his wife to get messages, but this one felt different. He opened the message. "I miss you so much. I can't wait to see you again. I feel so alive when I'm with you." John's heart stopped. The message was from a man. He didn't know who it was, but it clearly wasn't someone he recognized. He checked the phone number, but it was unlisted, private. His first instinct was to shrug it off. Maybe it was some work-related text or a mistaken number. But a nagging feeling gnawed at him. He felt like he had to know more. He asked Mary about it that night, casually. "Who's this?" he said, holding the phone in front of her. Mary's face turned pale. She immediately tried to grab the phone, but John pulled it away. "I don't know," she replied, voice shaking. "It's nothing. Just someone from work." Something about her response didn't sit right with John. The way she avoided eye contact, the quickness of her answer, it all felt off. But he didn't press her. Instead, he let it slide, thinking that maybe it was just his own insecurities getting the best of him. He trusted Mary, or at least he thought he did. But over the next few weeks, the messages didn't stop. John's curiosity turned into suspicion, and that suspicion soon gave way to fear. Every time he checked his phone, there was a new message from the same unknown number, always loving, always intimate. His heart began to race every time he saw her phone light up. Each message was a tiny piece of a puzzle he didn't want to solve, but he couldn't stop himself from trying. He began to dig. One day, when Mary was in the shower, he grabbed her phone and opened her messages. That's when the floodgates opened. The texts were just the tip of the iceberg. As he scrolled through her conversations, John discovered an affair. The messages were flirty, intimate, and detailed. Everything a man could want, but there was more. Pictures. Pictures that made John's blood run cold. Mary had been meeting this man for months, while he was away at work, while he thought everything was fine at home. They had met in person twice, and each time was documented with photographs, laughing in coffee shops, walking through parks, sharing private moments that John had no idea about. His stomach twisted. His first instinct was to confront her immediately, but something inside him held him back. Instead, he closed the phone and sat there in silence, processing what he had just uncovered. He couldn't believe it. His wife, his best friend, the woman he had been with for over 2 decades, had been living a double life. He felt betrayed in a way he had never known possible. He had no idea how long the affair had been going on, but the betrayal stung deeper with each passing minute. John didn't know what to do. The anger, hurt, and confusion were overwhelming. He had no words to express how he felt. He just sat there in their bedroom, alone in the quiet, with the weight of the truth pressing down on him. John sat on the edge of their bed for what felt like an eternity, the weight of the discovery crashing over him. He couldn't even make sense of the emotions flooding through him. Hurt, betrayal, confusion, and even anger. It was as if his whole world had been upended in a moment, leaving him unable to find solid ground. He knew he had to confront Mary. but the thought of facing her, looking her in the eye after everything he had found, terrified him. What would he say? What could he possibly say that would make sense of what he had just learned? He couldn't sleep that night. Tossing and turning in the bed they had shared for years, the silence was deafening. Finally, as the sun began to rise, he made a decision. He would confront her. He didn't want to do it like this. He didn't want to ambush her, but he also knew he couldn't let the lies continue. He had to know the truth, and he had to hear it from her mouth. Mary woke up, unaware of the storm that was coming. John watched her from the kitchen as she made her coffee, her movements slow and casual. It sickened him. How normal she looked, how oblivious she was to the destruction that had been quietly unfolding behind closed doors. He walked into the kitchen, the tension between them palpable. Mary looked up, offering a half smile as she sipped her coffee. "Morning," she said, her voice light, almost too light. "Morning," John replied, his voice strained. He took a deep breath. "We need to talk." Her smile faltered slightly, but she didn't say anything. Instead, she set her cup down and gave him a questioning look, sensing the seriousness in his tone. "I found something," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The words felt foreign in his mouth, like a sentence that shouldn't have been said, but it was already out there. "I know about the affair." Mary's face drained of color. Her eyes widened, and she froze, standing still as if the world had just shifted beneath her feet. For a moment, she said nothing, and the silence between them felt suffocating. "John," she began, but John held up a hand, stopping her. "I know everything. I saw the messages, the pictures, the meetings. You've been lying to me for months." His voice cracked at the last words, and he hated how weak he sounded, but he couldn't help it. His heart felt like it was breaking. Mary's eyes darted around the room as if she were searching for a way to escape, but she couldn't. She was cornered. "John, please," she said, her voice breaking, but still, she couldn't meet his eyes. "It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything. I didn't mean to hurt you." "A mistake?" John repeated, his voice rising with the flood of emotions that had been building inside him. "You had an affair for 18 months. It wasn't a mistake, Mary. You lied to me. You deceived me. You knew what you were doing, and you did it anyway." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she took a step toward him, but he stepped back, unable to let her close. He was too hurt, too angry. "I was so lonely, John," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I thought we were drifting apart, and I met him, and it felt like I was seen again. I'm sorry, I didn't mean for it to go this far." John's chest tightened as her words hit him. The betrayal stung, but it was the realization that she had been seeking validation from someone else, someone who didn't have the years of shared history they did. That cut the deepest. "You didn't mean for it to go this far?" John echoed, disbelief in his voice. "You didn't mean for it to go this far, but it did. You let it go on for 18 months. You let someone else into our life, and you broke my trust." He paused, feeling the weight of everything crashing down on him. He wanted to scream, to lash out, but he just stood there trying to keep himself together. Mary stepped back, tears streaming down her face. "I never wanted to hurt you, John. I thought I could keep it hidden, that it wouldn't affect you, but I was wrong. I'm so sorry. Please, forgive me." John looked at her, his heart breaking at the sight of her tears, but he couldn't bring himself to feel sympathy. How could he? She had betrayed him, and now she was begging for forgiveness. But the truth was, he didn't know if he could forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Mary," John said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I don't know if I can ever trust you again." Mary crumpled in front of him, sobbing uncontrollably. "Please, John. I was stupid. I didn't think. I don't want to hear excuses anymore," John cut her off. He had heard enough. He couldn't hear her rationalizations anymore. "You've hurt me, and you've hurt this family. You need to think about what you've done." With that, John turned and walked out of the kitchen, leaving Mary standing there, broken and regretful. After the confrontation with Mary, John felt like the ground beneath him had completely collapsed. The weight of the betrayal crushed him with every passing hour. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the messages, the photos, the proof that she had been unfaithful to him for so long. It was all he could think about. The shock was settling in, but the anger, the hurt, and the confusion were still there, churning inside him. He spent the next few days in a fog. He couldn't focus on anything. He couldn't even bring himself to look at Mary anymore. The house felt suffocating, like a prison of his own making. He had spent over 25 years building a life with her, and now it all felt like a lie. It didn't matter how much they had shared in the past. It didn't matter how many milestones they had crossed together. What mattered now was the undeniable truth. She had betrayed him in the worst way possible. John's thoughts turned dark. He couldn't shake the image of the man she had been with, the way she had lied to him, the way she had continued the affair behind his back, all while acting like everything was fine at home. It felt like a living nightmare, and there was no escape. But John wasn't the type to let his emotions rule him forever. He knew he had to make a choice. He couldn't stay in this place of limbo. Either he would fight for the marriage, or he would walk away. A few days after the confrontation, John decided he needed space. He couldn't process everything with Mary in the same house. She was apologizing, crying, trying to explain herself, but he didn't want to hear it. He didn't want to hear her excuses. Not yet. Maybe not ever. He took a walk through the park near their house, trying to clear his mind. The cool breeze brushed against his skin, and for the first time in days he felt like he could breathe. He had been so consumed by the anger and the pain that he hadn't realized how badly he needed this moment of clarity. As he sat on a bench, watching the trees sway gently in the wind, John thought about everything. He thought about his children, about the years he had spent with Mary. He thought about the family they had built, the life they had created together. And for the first time, he wondered if it was all worth saving. He knew he couldn't make this decision in a rush. He wasn't ready to make any drastic moves yet. But one thing became crystal clear to him in that moment. He needed to take control of his own healing. Whether that meant working on the marriage or moving on, the decision would be his, and it would come when he was ready. John returned home that evening, but he didn't go straight to Mary. He needed time, and he wasn't going to pretend everything was fine. He didn't want to lash out at her in anger anymore. He had enough of that. The anger had taken over his life for too long, and he was tired of it. It was time to start thinking about himself, for once in a long time. The next morning, he did something he hadn't done in years. He went for a run. It wasn't just for the physical exercise. He needed to feel in control of something again. He needed to feel like he could breathe. The pounding of his feet against the pavement helped release some of the tension in his chest. But it didn't solve everything. It didn't fix the broken parts of his heart. As he jogged, his mind wandered back to the first few years of his marriage to Mary. He remembered the love, the joy, and the hope they had once shared. But it wasn't the same now. The betrayal had torn through the foundation of everything they had built. And John knew that it would take more than a few apologies to fix that. He was walking a tightrope, trying to balance between what he wanted, what he needed, and the reality of the situation. Every part of him told him to leave, to walk away from the woman who had betrayed him so deeply. But another part of him, his heart, his sense of loyalty, told him to try to repair what had been broken. The question haunted him. Could he ever trust her again? That evening, John sat down with Mary. This time, it wasn't a confrontation, but a conversation. They both knew that their marriage had changed forever, and that they couldn't go back to how things had been. But they needed to talk about what came next. "I don't know what I'm doing anymore," John admitted, his voice rough. "I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I can ever trust you again." Mary was silent for a long moment, her eyes filled with tears. She had apologized countless times, but now she just sat there, unable to say anything more. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said finally, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't deserve it. But I'm here, John. I want to make this right. I'm not asking you to forget, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild this." John looked at her, his heart torn between what he felt for her and what she had done. For the first time in days, he felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe they could rebuild, but maybe they couldn't. The path forward wasn't clear, and it wouldn't be easy. It would take time. "Let's take it one day at a time," he said, his voice steady but uncertain. "I don't know what will happen, but we can't fix this all at once." A few weeks had passed since the conversation John had with Mary, and the quiet tension between them hadn't eased. It was as if they were both waiting for something, some sign, some moment that would tell them what came next. But neither of them knew what that was. Neither of them had the answer. John spent the next several days trying to figure out where his mind was, what his heart wanted. Every day felt like an emotional roller coaster, a tug-of-war between love and hurt, trust and betrayal. He hadn't decided whether he was willing to forgive Mary yet, and deep down, he wasn't sure if he even could. It wasn't just the affair that had shattered him, it was everything else that came with it, the lies, the secrets, the deceit. But there was something else, something about the life they had built together. The kids, the memories, their history. It wasn't easy to walk away from all of that. Could he really just throw away 25 years of marriage? The question lingered in his mind, and the more he thought about it, the more he realized he wasn't ready to make any drastic moves. He wasn't ready to let go completely. Maybe there was still a chance. Maybe he could rebuild. But rebuilding would mean more than just talking about it. It would take action. It would take trust. It would take time. John and Mary agreed to go to marriage counseling. It was a suggestion he had made after weeks of silence and uncertain conversations. It wasn't something they had ever talked about before, but now it seemed like the only path forward. At first, Mary was hesitant. She was afraid of what the counselor might say, and part of her felt like it would be an admission of guilt. But John knew that they needed help. They couldn't fix this alone. The first few sessions were difficult. The air between them was thick with unresolved emotions, and the counselor had to tread carefully, guiding them through their pain and anger. John found it hard to sit across from Mary, hearing her admit that she had been unfaithful. It was like reliving the betrayal all over again. The more she talked, the more his heart ached. But something in him softened over time. During the sessions, he listened to her. He heard her regrets, her tears, and the pain in her voice. For the first time since he discovered the affair, he saw vulnerability in her. He began to understand that while her actions were unforgivable, her pain was real too. She wasn't the same woman who had hurt him so deeply. She was someone trying to rebuild, just as he was. But the road wasn't easy. There were nights when John couldn't sleep, lying awake in bed, his thoughts racing. His mind would wander back to the affair, back to the photos, the messages, the lies. How could he ever forget that? How could he ever trust her again? But then there were the good days. The days when they laughed together, when they talked about the future, when they remembered why they had fallen in love in the first place. On those days, John felt a glimmer of hope. The process was slow. The healing didn't happen overnight, and the trust wasn't restored in a week or even a month. But little by little, John began to notice the subtle changes. Mary was trying. She was doing the work, showing up to every session, listening, apologizing, not just with words, but with actions. She was patient when he needed space, understanding when he was angry, and always there when he was ready to talk. It wasn't easy. There were moments when John doubted himself, when he felt like giving up. He questioned if the hurt would ever go away, if the pieces of their marriage could ever fit together again. But there were also moments of clarity, when he realized that healing wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about acknowledging it, feeling the pain, and deciding to move forward anyway. One evening, about 4 months into their counseling, John and Mary sat down together on the couch. It was a quiet night, no distractions, no phones, just them. Mary looked at him with a soft expression, her eyes filled with vulnerability. "I know it's been hard," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I'm trying, John. I'm trying to make things right. I can't change what happened, but I can change what happens from now on." John looked at her, his heart heavy but also lighter than it had been in months. "I know you're trying," he said, his voice steady, "and I'm trying too. I don't know what the future holds, but I can't let go of everything just yet. I want to see if we can make it through this, together." Mary reached for his hand, and for the first time in a long time, they sat in silence, holding each other. It wasn't a perfect moment, and their marriage wasn't fixed yet. But in that moment, they both knew they were trying, and that for now was enough. The months that followed their decision to go to therapy were not without difficulty, but something had shifted in John. The anger he'd carried with him for so long had slowly begun to dissipate, replaced by determination to rebuild, whether with Mary or on his own. It wasn't just about the marriage anymore. It was about reclaiming the control he'd lost and moving forward in a way that allowed him to heal. John realized that healing didn't mean everything would go back to the way it was before the affair. The past couldn't be erased, but perhaps there was a way to build something new, something stronger. The question was whether he could truly trust Mary again. Every day, John faced a new challenge. Another moment where the weight of the betrayal hit him. A new situation where he had to decide whether or not he could let it go. But with each passing week, the burden felt a little less heavy. He wasn't naive. He knew the road to recovery wouldn't be linear, but the small moments of progress mattered. He started to feel like he was regaining his sense of self, even if that meant taking it slow. Mary, for her part, was doing everything she could. She was honest, open, and transparent. She shared the full truth about the affair, about her fears, her insecurities, and why she had made such a devastating mistake. But that honesty wasn't always easy to swallow for John. He still wrestled with the knowledge that his wife had betrayed him, and the days when he couldn't shake the anger were still frequent. But slowly, they began to rebuild. They went on date nights, just the two of them, even if the conversations were awkward at first. They took small steps, one day at a time. The days when the silence between them was deafening became fewer, and the laughter, though hesitant, began to fill their home again. Still, it was the smallest moments, when John caught her looking at him with sincerity, when they shared a quiet moment over dinner, that made him believe they might be able to get through this. But there was something John had to face first. He had to forgive himself. One afternoon, as John was working from home, he received a phone call that stopped him in his tracks. It was a number he didn't recognize, but something inside him told him to answer. "Hello?" he said cautiously. "Hi, is this John?" a voice on the other end asked. "This is Dr. Jenkins from the therapy office. I was hoping to speak with you." John immediately stiffened. Therapy? He hadn't expected a call from their counselor. "Yes, this is John," he replied, trying to keep his voice calm. "I just wanted to check in with you." Dr. Jenkins continued. "You've been doing well with your sessions, but I wanted to offer some additional support. We've talked a lot about your relationship with Mary, but I think it might be helpful for you to explore your own feelings, independent of the marriage. Sometimes it's easier to understand how to move forward if we can first understand what we need, individually." John took a deep breath. He hadn't thought about that before, about what he needed apart from the marriage. The idea of going to therapy on his own hadn't crossed his mind, but now it seemed almost necessary. I think I'd like that," John said. "I've been so focused on the marriage that I haven't really thought about myself." Dr. Jenkins gave him some advice and set up a few sessions for John. Over the next several weeks, John explored his emotions with the therapist. He talked about his feelings of betrayal, his anger, and how he'd always prioritized his family and marriage above his own needs. Slowly, he began to understand himself better. to make sense of the turmoil inside him. He had been so consumed by the hurt that he hadn't allowed himself the space to process the pain fully. He realized that while he was still hurt by Mary's actions, he was also angry at himself. He had ignored his own needs for so long, and now he had to learn how to put himself first, whether that meant repairing his marriage or not. The healing wasn't just happening within the marriage, it was happening within himself. John's perspective began to shift. He stopped thinking about what Mary had taken from him and started focusing on what he could gain. Could he learn to trust her again? Could they build a future together after everything that had happened? Only time would tell. But for the first time, John felt a sense of peace that hadn't been there in a long time. Whether it was with Mary or not, he would move forward. One evening, after several months of therapy and quiet reflection, John and Mary sat down for another conversation. It was a moment they both knew was coming, but weren't sure they were ready for. "I've been thinking," John began, his voice steady. "I can't promise I'll ever forget what happened, but I've decided I'm willing to try. I'm willing to give this a shot. But we both need to keep working. We both need to keep being honest with ourselves and with each other." Mary looked at him, her eyes filled with gratitude. She reached across the table and took his hand. "I don't deserve this, but I'll spend every day proving I'm worth it. I'm here, John. I'm not going anywhere." It wasn't perfect. They weren't magically healed. But in that moment, they both knew they were on the right path. As time went on, John and Mary began to rebuild their lives, piece by piece. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't perfect. There were still difficult days, moments when old wounds resurfaced, but they both worked at it. Slowly, they began to trust each other again, not fully, but in small, meaningful ways. John had changed. He wasn't the same man who had been blindsided by betrayal. He had learned to forgive himself and had found strength in putting his own needs first. He wasn't defined by the affair anymore. He had taken control of his own healing, and that made all the difference. For Mary, every day was a reminder of the damage she had done, but she was committed to showing John that she was deserving of a second chance. She had learned that real love meant being honest, transparent, and committed, not just in the easy moments, but in the hard ones too. They both knew they had a long road ahead, but for the first time in a long time, they were walking it together, steadily, cautiously, but together, and that, for now, was enough. And with that, John's journey of heartbreak, healing, and forgiveness comes to an end. But remember, every story has its beginning and its end. Until next time, in the next video.